Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lugos Journey podcast. Today, I have Nikki Groom. It's nice to have you on.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, of course. So, introduce yourself. Tell us what you're all about.
So I'm Nikki Groom and I'm a business, brand and marketing strategist. But unofficially, I'm most passionate about helping reflect back to you what makes you special and valuable so that you can make a bigger impact in the world.
Interesting. So,
Yeah.
tell us what you do. So, you are what I would like to call a female empowerist. You do a lot of stuff helping people, helping women, discover really who they are and what they could really do to make an impact on us, on the world. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And, I most want to help women empower themselves. And I think one huge way that we can do that is by remembering that we're already powerful. And in fact, you don't just have to be a woman to remember this. I think that anyone who's ever felt underestimated or like they don't belong or perhaps don't really understand their true potential can tap into this sense of innate power to really show up fully and do what they want in the world.
Interesting. So how do you do that? So what is your strategy? So you have your mastermind. Um, is it a club? Is that sort of it's a mastermind program, right? And
Yes.
so say, what that's all about.
Yeah, so I feel like mastermind kind of means different things to different people. In the context that I use it, basically I have kind of intimate groups of about 6 or 7 small business owners, and we meet weekly to workshop their challenges. We also celebrate their wins, which is really huge and is something that can often get forgotten when we're so focused on moving forward. So we celebrate their wins, we workshop their challenges, and then we have monthly guest experts come in and share their expertise as well. But really, it's like a great way to stay accountable to your goals. We spend a lot of time at the beginning of each quarter really cultivating a vision for our future and the future reality that we want to bring into the present day. And there's a lot of work that goes into it, but it's just a really great way to stay on track and work towards what you really want.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really gets me the most, and I noticed this amongst all my peers and friends, I noticed that we often find ourselves lost. There's a sort of belief that we live in sort of like we get stuck in our daily rituals, we live in our unconscious state, and we forget about all the things that are very important to us, and we sort of get lost in all of these we get lost in the monotonous tasks and things like that. So is the job of your program, is it just to get people to really be conscious about what they're doing and to hopefully be able for them to sort of snap out of that, focusing on the rat race and focusing more on, their goals and things that are really the most important?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great way to describe it, because especially when you're a business owner, you're so focused oftentimes on the day to day. If you have clients, you want to make sure those clients are happy. And it's the most tempting thing to dive into your inbox first thing in the morning and start to put everyone else's needs and priorities first. And there's a real art to being a business owner, which is not only creating time and space to get really clear on, okay, what is my vision? And doing that regularly. So has my vision changed? Have my goals shifted? What is my mission in the world? What is my purpose? And clearing enough space so you can really give that the ability to form in a meaningful way, and then finding time, carving out time inside your day-to-day to work on that vision, to work toward those goals. I think that's one of the hardest things to do as a business owner. And again, if you're going to talk about women in particular, but again, so many of us have this issue, I think that we forget that we need to reclaim our time. Our time belongs to us first and foremost, and we get to decide what we do with it. So much of my work is kind of helping people find ways to carve out that time so they can give their dreams and their desires the priority that they deserve.
So do you believe that sort of in today's world, we I don't know, I guess, like, I feel like today we sort of find ourselves addicted to putting our head down, like the people who they're the people who work like super hard for their goals, and I think it's incredible that you have people that just sit down and just work incredibly hard for their goals, and you formed a community based off that. And do you find that those sort of people are workaholics in the sense that, they not in a bad way, but in the fact that, they often find themselves lost, and they often find themselves working 16 hours a day, but then finding that they didn't really get as much done as they'd wanted to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely an easy thing to do when you're very, very passionate about the work that you're doing, which oftentimes the business owners that I'm working with, they feel called to do the work that they're doing. Maybe they've even left a corporate career. They've taken some risks in going after this dream that they have. And so not only is it incredibly important for them in terms of the revenue that they're bringing in so that they can, continue to create a life that feels fulfilling and gives them the experiences that they want. But in addition to that, they feel really passionate about it. They feel really purposeful. And so it's very hard to pull yourself away from that. And then secondly, yes, it's so easy to spend the entire day working on the minutia, especially when you're a solopreneur. You kind of wear all the hats, you have to do all the
Yeah.
things. And so it's really easy to spend the whole day doing so much. And then at the end of the day, think, wait, I really feel like I did nothing. Because again, you've kind of got sucked into those little itty bitty tasks that do need to get done. But at the end of the day, are those the things that are going to be moving you towards your goals? So again, taking time and space to work on your bigger vision. And I talk about it in terms of working on your business instead of in your business is so
Mhm.
important. And we were just talking before we started chatting just now that I don't usually have calls early on in the morning because that for me is my kind of creative time. I don't want to dive straight into my emails. I want to take time to think about, right, what am I trying to accomplish? What were my goals for this quarter? And how can I start to, take some tangible steps so that I can move closer to that place?
Yeah, Joseph Campbell believes that in the morning, every morning, we should have 1 hour of just uninterrupted time where we just tune out from the world, where we are not worried about the news, not worried about our tasks for the day, not worried about anything, where we should just, sort of be by ourselves and really worry about ourselves. So I do actually want to ask you, so what is your morning routine? And also, how long does it take you from the time you wake up to start begin working?
Yeah, I love that question because I am fascinated by morning routines, and I definitely agree with Joseph and yourself that they're so important and they do they do make such a big impact on our days. I will say that I have tried different routines, and I will also want to normalize the fact that most of us aren't robots who have, a set routine and we never ever deviate from it and we follow it to perfection.
Yeah.
I'm very much about normalizing the fact that we can kind of have this ideal routine and it's okay if you don't do it every single day. For me, meditation has been an absolute game changer. I remember for years I would hear people talk about meditation and I would think, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then finally I did a 30-day meditation challenge and it literally changed everything in my business. My word of the year that year was intention. And it was only after I did this meditation challenge that I realized I'd been racing forward in my business. And when I slowed down enough, I could really get intentional about, does this serve me? Is this the thing that I'm supposed to be saying yes to? It just gave me so much more clarity and certainty around everything that I was doing in my business. And that's really the moment that everything began to shift. So before that point, I had a thriving copywriting business and it was doing really well. I had lots and lots of clients. I was in demand, but I also felt like I was kind of doing too much and I felt very stressed a lot of the time. And after this meditation challenge, that really gave me the opportunity to start to say yes to some different opportunities, some different clients and projects that I maybe hadn't tried before. And again, it just shifted everything for me. So meditation is huge. And what's lovely about meditation is that it has this kind of compound effect. So if you do it every single day or most days for a period of time, it doesn't matter where you are or what kind of stressful moment you find yourself in, you can kind of get rooted and grounded back in that place of being like, oh yes, I remember who I really am and what I'm truly capable of. So that has been a game changer for me. I usually wake up about 7 a.m. For a long time, I felt like Nikki, you're not waking up early enough. You hear about the most successful people. I feel like there's endless articles about who's what the most successful people do every day. They wake up at 4 a.m. and they get a workout in and they do this and they do that. Like, that's, my body just doesn't want to wake up before 7 a.m. So 7 a.m. I kind of naturally wake up, go straight into the meditation. I'll walk my rescue dog, Luna, who you probably just saw in the background. And then, I like to sometimes read some nonfiction in the morning, particularly things that are going to help me in my business and kind of get my thoughts ticking along. Some journaling can be really great just in terms of kind of clearing my mind and getting it ready for the day. The hardest habit that I have had, and I know that a lot of people have this as well, the hardest habit for me to break is looking at my phone first thing in the morning and just kind of like scrolling for like an hour at a time. So one thing that I did do recently is buy an old school alarm clock, so that I did have the option of putting my phone in the other room and waking up with that. I still haven't quite mastered that. It's so hard to put our devices to one side. With that in mind, actually, when I first start my day, I'm sat at my desk right now, and I will oftentimes put my phone in, I'll mute it and I'll put it in the drawer. So I don't look at it. I don't know what's happening. I'm not tempted to pick it up. And that way I can just really focus on what I need to get done first thing, which is oftentimes, I really love to start my day with one thing that is most important to me. And so I think we're probably going to get to talk about my book at some point. And when I was writing my book, it would always be tasks related to writing the book or marketing the book later on. So because that's been such a big project for me. And then it would be moving into, okay, now let's look at the client work, or let's look at some other tasks that I need to address. And then kind of the administrative stuff, I try and push off to the end of the day.
It's interesting. I mean, what you're really talking about here is cultivating a morning where you're actually you're mindful, right? I think intention is a great word for it, trying to really figure out, what am I doing today? And if I do exactly what I plan to do today, will it be a good day? Like,
Right.
most people very much struggle with that exact idea. Like, they just wake up, put their head down, and then realize that they got nowhere because they never had a plan. So
Yeah.
I must ask you, because I think this is the biggest problem for, I think everybody knows that they should meditate. I think everybody knows that they should have some sort of intention for their day, but like 2% of people actually do it. So for the skeptic, so for the person who, is very much either has tried meditation before and has been successful, or someone who looks at meditation and says, why am I doing some Buddhist, monk practice? What would be your answer to be like, no, this is actually worthwhile?
It's like anything, right? And I totally take your point. It's like, well, I think sometimes particularly if we really value our own decision-making ability, we don't want somebody to say, you should eat more leafy green vegetables, you should meditate every day, because our first reaction is to say, I don't got to do nothing. So I think that the meditation thing, the only thing I can say about it is try it. So if you've heard people talk about it and they're like, la da da, it has all these great positive effects in your life, just try it. And, I'm always looking for the easiest way to do something. One of my favorite questions to ask is, what if it were easy? Like, I don't think that everything needs to be hard necessarily. And so, there are some people who will talk about meditation that you have to, sit in a certain way, and maybe a meditation cushion will help, and light some candles and do this. No, like, you can literally just wake up, there's a great app called Insight Timer that has guided meditations. And if you feel like you can only really sit still or lay still for a couple of minutes, then find a meditation on there that's 2 minutes long and listen to it. And then, and the great thing with Insight Timer is that it helps you, it kind of marks off your progress. So like, yeah, you've done 2 days in a row, or you've done 3 days in a row. So it kind of gives you little goalposts. Just try it for a few weeks, try it for a month. And, maybe slowly increase the amount of time that you do. I find that guided meditations are most useful because you don't have to, you can kind of focus on this other person's voice. And the goal is not to stop thinking for a period of time. It's just to become more aware of the thoughts that you're having, and get used to moving out of your head and more into a heart space, which is just a better way to do everything in life, let's be honest. So yeah, I would say just try it. And maybe you hate it, but I'm gonna guess it's probably gonna have some pretty significant impact on your life.
I agree. There's actually a quote that I really, really love. It's so Henry David Thoreau actually he went, there's a big thing about Henry David Thoreau. He went to the woods, right? He's very famous for just going to the woods and secluding himself. And he said, "I went to the woods because I wish to live deliberately, you know, to to front only the essential facts of life. And I see if I could not learn what I had to teach, and not when I came to die discover that I had not lived." And
Mm,
it's such a powerful quote for him to really be like, I decided to, what he's essentially saying is, I decided to make myself conscious. I decided to, live my life with intention instead of just living the unconscious, sort of automatic programming that we often find ourselves. And I find that, having a morning routine, especially, right? But meditation, in particular, is the most important to really help people sort of, wake up and just be like, all right, this morning I'm actually going to focus on something important. It's not just going to be, me just unconsciously, getting to work and doing some random things. The purpose of meditation is to really bring yourself in touch with your soul, you could say.
yes.
And
Yeah, I
to,
mean,
mhm.
totally. Yes, Nick. I remember when I left the corporate workspace quite a few years ago now, and I remember thinking to myself, I don't know who I am. And it suddenly seemed really important in the context of, well, if I'm going to build this business and I'm going to build this personal brand, then who the hell am I? Like, I get to choose who I am, but who am I? And I think that that practice of meditation, it totally gives you this deeper understanding of who you are and what your potential is. And I think, in terms of self-growth and self-development, it's there's no it's very hard to truly own your power and understand your true potential unless you've taken time to get quiet and just be with yourself.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and
yeah.
I think the reason behind that is because we often find ourselves, and I did this in the past so often, and I think I'm still trying to really figure it out. There needs to be sort of often we, if you want to be like a public personality, which we do, and everyone really does, because we all have our own private life as well as our public life. There's usually a disunion between the person that we are alone and the persona that we end up putting up, and it's not authentic, right? Like, it's like putting on a mask, you could say. And the best part about being mindful, the best part about meditation and all these things, they really unite, your authentic self with the person that you put as a front, and it really, I think, maybe one of the biggest goals in life that people really never discover is, maybe hopefully one day we can be the same person across all situations, right? Like, our own private self is also our public self, and we don't have to put on a mask around anyone else.
Yes, I so agree with that. And in fact, that's one of my greatest joys in life, is helping other people realize that, when you think about the things that you do really well, your strengths, your gifts, like, all of us have that kind of shadow side. So, the things that make us great, someone once said to me, the things that make us great also can make us assholes. So, like, we all have, there are so many things that I think oftentimes we think we have to kind of hide away. And one of my greatest joys is helping people realize that you have so much that is of value to offer the world, and, like, be all of you, bring all of yourself to the table. And I agree, the most resonant brands, most engaging businesses and marketing is when people are just showing up exactly as they are. I'm lucky because quite early on in building my business, I did a survey to kind of all my closest friends and family, and I said, hey, what 3 words would you use to describe me? And I had no idea what people would say. And then I kind of did this tally, and one of the words that kept coming up was
Mhm,
real. And I was like,
mhm,
oh, okay. And the essence of being real is just showing up exactly as you are, being that open book, being transparent. And that has literally been one of the words that I have lived by. And that has really helped me in terms of, kind of, like you said, merging that kind of private and public self. And so, if you hear me speak in an interview, or if you sit opposite me in a coffee shop, or if we've developed a friendship, I'll be that same person. I'll say those same things. I don't. And what the advantage is that I never have to expend that extra energy on putting on a mask or worrying about what I've said to one person and whether I've said something different to a different person. I can just be me in every single situation, and that feels really very much like owning my power.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the real crux of that, like that's so important. And the real crux of that is really understanding who you are. Most people are so disconnected from themselves. And I think, I think that full explanation, what we just did for the last 20 minutes is the perfect explanation for why meditation is important. I think that's it, right? Like
Yep.
really getting in touch with yourself and really understanding, what? Like this is you, right? Like those 30 minutes, just those 10 minutes that you spend every single day just getting in touch with yourself is 80%, 90% of the most important things that you're going to do in that day, just because you could finally understand really what's going on inside of you.
Yeah, and one of the main things that I talk about, so my book is called A Power of Your Own.
Yes,
I just realized
explain.
I hadn't mentioned that. But one of the main things that I talk about in there is the fact that so many of us believe what the world tells us about who we should be or what we should do or not do. And I think there's oftentimes a lot of shame around how we show up in the world, and that's why we kind of hide these certain parts of ourselves away, or we try and assimilate. We're maybe scared to do something that's outside our comfort zone, or that we don't see anybody else doing. That's kind of like an ongoing battle in our lives. And again, when you get back to that, when you really kind of ground and root yourself in that true understanding of who you are, which is enabled and facilitated through meditation, then you can realize it actually doesn't matter what the outside world says. Like, I know who I am at my heart, at my core. I know that I do not need to be ashamed. I know that I am fully human and imperfect, and that's okay. And I also realize that I have limitless potential, and I can tap into that every day.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I think, in my life, I've noticed, especially, I'm 19 years old at this point. So I grew up not, in the lifestyle where you grow up, where we're reading books and playing outside and things like that. I grew up with a GameCube. I grew up with a DS. I grew up with all these electronic devices. And then, yes, it is all put together. Everything is amalgamated in this phone that is such a big distraction. And I find that distractions are the biggest takeaway from discovering, I guess, discovering who we really are. But the biggest problem is we can't figure out our inner self, our intentions, our consciousness. We can't become conscious because the phone has such a strong intention on making us unconscious, right? Trying to, if we're on social media, the goal of social media is to just make us mindlessly scroll and things like that. And I know, I think I would personally say that about 99% of people struggle with this exact idea. And that is why I tend to be, somewhat, I call myself nonconformist, but people also call me weird. I actually have a flip phone. So
Oh, I'm so
yes,
jealous. I want a flip phone.
I'm telling you, these things are $10 on Amazon,
Love
and
it.
they cost absolutely nothing, because if you're to buy a phone, then you have to pay the data plans and all that stuff. Monetarily, it's the best decision, but I really found that getting the flip phone, the real beautiful decision behind it is that it really helps me, it takes back 2.5 hours of my day, essentially.
Yeah. I think that's huge. I absolutely love that you have a flip phone. And by the way, a friend of mine used to call me weird many, many years ago, and I thought it was like a bad thing. And then I realized that being weird is actually good. So
Agreed.
it's good that you're nonconformist. It's good that you're weird. And it's amazing that you have a flip phone. It's amazing that you're 19 and you're already figuring this stuff out. And that we're having conversations like this. I mean, I just turned 40. I started my business when I was 32. And at that point in my life, I mean, as I said, I didn't really have a true sense of who I was. And that my entrepreneurial journey really started this journey of self-development, self-growth for me. I managed to work with so many incredible clients who taught me so much. And, it's taken me a while even to get to this point. The fact that you're starting at 19 and you're already figuring this stuff out, and you're already aware of the things that are not enabling you to bring your best and highest self to every day is incredible. Yeah, I think it's amazing. I want to get a flip phone
No,
too.
no, thank you. I mean, I just noticed, I spent my whole life around people who had midlife crises, and I noticed that most people have a midlife crisis. Actually, you were early in that. Most people have their midlife crisis around 40, 45, 50. They notice that they spent their whole life, either, let's say, chasing money and then realizing that money wasn't the answer, or chasing, or getting a divorce and noticing that, you've been living your life as sort of like a lie, and all these things sort of come together, and midlife crisis hits, and it's the first time that you wake up and say, wow, I just became conscious. I just became aware of, an entire new world. I noticed that you said this too, 32 hit and your whole entire life changed. And for me, I was 16 when it happened. I guess I was lucky enough to be 16, and it just came upon me, and I felt like my life from 0 years old to 16 and then 16 onwards, it was like I was a completely new person. I don't know if you felt the same way.
I would say that I grew up in a very, very strict family, in a born again Christian family. I went to church until I was 18. We don't necessarily need to get into the religion piece. Um,
No, we
and
could.
so
Big
I
part.
definitely, I definitely was taught to live my life in a certain way. And if I stepped outside that, there was a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. I mean, even to the point of having a certain thought that you weren't supposed to have, I would immediately feel shame and feel bad for having a certain thought. And so going to university at, I think, like 18, 19, was the time that I started to think, well, you know, who am I as an individual? What do I stand for? And that was the time when I really began to identify my values. And one of those values was honesty, which I guess ties into the real thing that came on later on. I
Yeah.
just decided, like, I just always want to be honest. Um, and I also remember one of my guiding words back then was experience. I hadn't experienced a lot, and I wanted to experience all the things, especially like everything that had ever been off the table. I wanted to experience all the things. And I'm in a sense, I definitely don't have any regrets. But now looking back, I'm like, wow, that was the wrong word. Because now I realize that really what it was all about is self-awareness, and really understanding that the answers weren't outside me. They were never outside me. They were always inside me. And I think
Wow.
that learning to love myself was the moment that everything began to shift. And yeah, so.
Wow, I think that was put beautifully. But the one thing, so I actually had 2 episodes ago, I had a guy named Darius Farrell come on my podcast, and he said exactly what you just said. He said, in the Christian, I guess doctrine growing up, that we grow up and we are taught that thoughts are wrong. We're taught, actually, I did more research on it. Jesus said in one of his, I guess, statements, whatever, he said, anybody, this is for men specifically, but obviously it applies to women. He goes, any man who looks upon a woman and any man who looks upon a woman has already committed adultery in his heart. And it's like, he's saying just the thought of, being with a woman or anything like that is a sin. And I think we are raised in that idea, that sort of idea that you should reject your feelings. All the feelings that come to you are not natural, or all the natural feelings that you feel are wrong, and that you should push them away into sort of like a closet in your mind, and to just keep pushing them there. But then it doesn't take into account that the more you push them there, eventually that closet is going to be full, and then everything comes falling out. And I think that's what so Darius talked about how in the Eastern religions, in the mindfulness, Buddhist, Taoism, all these things, they talk about accepting your feelings, confronting your feelings, and really believing that nature or your natural state or whatever comes from inside of you is worthwhile. It's your body trying to tell you something. It's your spirit trying to tell you something. It's not some, unnatural thing that should be denied. And I think, that's a big hurdle that almost all of us have to kind of get through, because it really blocks us from, like, what's going on inside of us.
Definitely. And I feel like so much of our lives, we kind of grow up and then we maybe have some moments of greater awareness, and we begin to become conscious of who we are and what maybe our place is in the world. And then kind of becomes this great process of unraveling. You know, every time we get to a place where we're like, I really want to do this thing, and yet I'm not doing the thing. What is getting in the way? Is there a
Yeah.
thought or a story or an old habit that's so ingrained in me that I really need to look at and send love to and work at unraveling and maybe finding a different way to be so that I can move forward? It's a really interesting way to live. And I think that as a business owner, that process is expedited, because if you are not succeeding in a certain area, you need to address that really fast. And if you're the bottleneck, if you're the thing if you're the person getting stuck, if you're the obstacle, then you really need to kind of look inward and figure out what that is. I mean, I talk a lot about how when I first built my business, I really essentially built it from the outside in. And so I remember having a conversation with somebody, and I said, well, I have a marketing background and I really love to write. And they said, well, you should be a copywriter then. So I became a copywriter. And then, I looked at someone else for my business model. I was like, well, that looks kind of cool. So I'll do that. And I think there needs to be a degree of that in the beginning. But again, that 30-day meditation challenge was huge for me, because it helped me start the process of building my business from the inside out. And that's, it doesn't matter whether you have a business or you're following a certain career, or just trying to figure out what you want to do in the world. I think following what your heart tells you and really kind of doing what you want to do from the inside out rather than the outside in is really the key. I mean, it's not that you can't seek other people's opinions and kind of take them on board. But yeah, I think that makes a huge difference.
So I mean, I would definitely love to hear you explain. So first of all, take us through what your actual process was when you did that inside out sort of mentality, and what exactly is an inside out mentality?
Yeah, I think in a business context, but I guess this really applies no matter what you're doing. My why was really important to me. What is that greater impact that I want to have in the world? And in fact, I ask people a similar question when they're trying to figure out, okay, what's my 5-year vision? What is that vision that I want to transform into reality? I ask them similar questions, and I say, if you could create a version of the future that's unobstructed by your current reality, what would that look like? What kind of business would you love to create? And that unobstructed by your current reality is really important, because oftentimes our brain starts to say, well, I can't do that because of this, or I don't have the resources, or I don't have it. So it's like, no. We're going to kind of quiet those voices for right now. And we're just going to really get into that heart space and think about what is that future reality that we'd love to make possible. And then it's like, well, why? And so we get really nice and deep into that sense of purpose that's driving you. And oftentimes, I think that a portion of our why is always more head driven, if that makes sense. So it can be about, I just want to earn a certain amount of money so that I'm comfortable. But I'm always really fascinated by that bigger sense of purpose, that bigger sense of impact that you want to have in the world, those people that you really feel called to help. That I think is such a fascinating place to be in. And often what I've found is that people's why ties back to their own experiences. Well, I was in this predicament, or I was in this space and I figured out a way through, and now I want to help other people in the same way. Or, I witnessed somebody else experiencing this thing, and I don't want anyone else to have to experience that. That kind of stuff is so juicy to me. I love helping people get into that space. And then you can begin to build it out in terms of, okay, then now I know what my vision is and my why is and my story is, maybe that's fueling me forward. What is my mission? What do I want to be doing? How do I want to be showing up every day? And kind of that branding and marketing piece, that and the business model, those are kind of the outside pieces that are so important. But I really think that deep work, those deep and meaningful questions need to happen first.
So why do you think, so when you talk about people discovering their why, and I think this is true in business and in life, because actually I wrote a book this year about helping people break bad habits. And one of the big solutions is you need to find your why, right? Like I think it's so important. Do you think this why, does it come from, where does it come from, right? Does it come from
Mm.
relationships? Does it come from money? Does it come from, any sort of goals, or must it come from something deep?
I think, yeah, you can have multiple whys and they can come from all different places. I think the deeper why is often that place from which you want to have a bigger impact. And I
Mhm.
also have learned that maybe some people don't feel as passionately about this, and that's really okay. So I don't know if you've ever taken the Strengths Finder test, but one of my top 5 strengths is significance. And that means
Mhm.
that I'm very much focused on how can I, as me, little old me, how can I help other people? How can I have a bigger impact? How can I use what I have to make a difference in the world? Like, I'm very much consumed with that. And I love working with people who are kind of on that same level. And, if I really get deep about it, I guess that does really tie into my background and the way that I grew up, which is, we have this set purpose in life and this is what we're all here to do. And, a lot of that rhetoric, I guess, um, is reflected in kind of how I work now. Um, and I've read a blog post before by one of my peers who's like, maybe I don't want to make a big impact, maybe I just want to make money, and that's fine, that's cool.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think there's anything. I think that we attach so many negative connotations to the word money, and it's like
Yeah.
it's a thing that makes the world go round. So it's not a bad thing. However, I think that my work is so rooted in, okay, what is that deeper why? And I have always loved working with people who really want to make a bigger difference, who don't just kind of want to do their thing, but they want to really ignite their fullest potential. And uh, and they do that by figuring out how they can use their strengths and their gifts and the way that they uniquely look at the world to help other people.
I do completely agree, and I think that is my one huge critique on money. On money, it is not helping you pursue your own potential. It's helping you pursue some goal that doesn't really get you to exactly where you want to go. Actually, Tony Robbins, he said, beautiful quote. He goes, "Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure." And I completely agree. I think that so many people spend their entire lives, and I think that's the basis for a midlife crisis, saying, okay, I've spent 30 years, 20 years, and I've got the gold watch, like I worked and I succeeded. I became a good employee in my company, got a stable job, and all these beautiful things happen to me, but I'm not where I want to be yet. I'm not, I always spent my life focusing from the outside in instead of the inside out. I focus on money that will make me happy instead of happiness that will make me money. And I think the struggle behind that is, yes, you're not, first of all, you're not in touch with yourself, because yourself is money. If you focus on, if you're so driven by that external force. But at the same time, then you're really struggling with finding something meaningful. Like, how are you supposed to find something meaningful when you're spending your whole life really trying to chase something that, again, money will not drive fulfillment. Money will maybe help you in fulfillment. So I think, there's a big disconnect there. And I think that's where most people struggle with.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm also really passionate about helping people kind of marry the two, because oftentimes what happens is people think, well, I don't want to be a slave to money, and I just want to create a business that brings me joy and that allows me to feel on purpose and that feels really fulfilling to me. So I'm just going to go down this route and not stress about the money. And then inevitably they run up against problems in their business
Yeah.
because they've created that. It's, and I talk about this in my book as well. It's almost like you've created this new reality for yourself and you feel just as trapped as before, because you still have to earn money to make sure that you're taken care of, which I think is so important. And then over time, you know, the more money that you earn, the more that you're able to do, the bigger the reach that you're able to have, the more people that you're able to help, whether it's donating money or however you decide to do it. And so I always talk about the fact that it is possible to live a life on purpose and give yourself a raise. You know, it's possible to do these two things. It's possible to earn money and be taken care of financially and otherwise. And it's possible to, you know, be having a bigger impact and helping the people that you most want to serve. So I really believe that these two things are possible. And, you know, we had spent a little bit of time at the beginning talking about the mastermind group that I run. That's really what I'm helping these primarily women, small business owners with, is marrying the two, you know, helping them deepen into the work that's calling them forward and make sure that they're charging what they can charge and that they're taking account of all the experience and strengths and everything that they uniquely bring to the table in order that they can really grow and serve in the way that they want to.
Wow. I think, you know, in in sum, you know, your entire mastermind community is all about unity. You know, bringing not only bringing people together, but within themselves, you're bringing together, you know, their internal drives and their external drives. And then also, I completely agree. You know, a life, you know, like if you really want to be like super spiritual and focus on yourself, go be a monk, right? But obviously most people don't want to go out and be a monk. You know, there's an external purpose that people have in money and things like that, and at the same time it's like you can't completely deny those things. The
Right.
answer really is unity, right? Bringing together the internal and the external, and hopefully, you know, marrying the two, just, you know, just like you said, to really bring some sort of meaningful purpose, as well as creating money.
Exactly. Yes.
So along your path, I very much am interested in how you so you started your journey around 8 years ago, we could say, of beginning copywriting and, you know, really changing your life. So what do you think were the biggest lessons that you learned, and maybe the biggest failures in writing your book, creating a community, being successful in copyright, like doing all these incredible things? What do you think were the most, you know, valuable things that you learned? And also, yes, where did you fail?
Yeah, I think that my first year in business is definitely a teachable moment, because a lot of people will interview me and say, well, how did you take the leap from working for a company to working for yourself? And I
Yeah.
always say, well, I didn't leap. There was no leaping. And in fact, anything that I've done, I don't feel like I've ever taken a leap.
Hmm.
I mean, maybe I came close to it when I moved to the States. But even then, that whole process was facilitated by the company that I was working for at the time. So I was managing the marketing for the UK subsidiary and then came over to manage the marketing for the North American subsidiary. But when I started my own business, it was kind of this series of, again, going back to my favorite word, intentional steps that helped me figure out how best to move forward. So I always emphasize that I had my business for at least a year, and it probably was like a little twinkle in my eye for at least a few years before that. The pieces were coming together over a period of time. I think we love those stories of overnight success, right? We want people to say, well, I started my business and within 3 months I was earning this amount of money. But let's be realistic. For most people, it doesn't look like that. And so I think, you know, if starting a business, for example, is something that you're thinking about, give yourself the time and space to really research that, figure out what the different steps might be. A great book that I read was Pam Slim's Escape Cubicle Nation. And she talks about the importance of setting aside a nest egg and things like that. But I definitely had, and I always say as well, there's no shame in having a side hustle. So for a while, my business was essentially a side hustle. I would work my 9 to 5, actually 8 to 5, and then I would go home and I would oftentimes work late into the night, which thankfully I could do when I was younger. I don't think I could do that as easily now. I'm always like wanting to go to bed pretty early. And yeah, gradually kind of eased into that space. I lined up clients so that I basically was forced to give in my notice because I already had clients lined up and waiting to work with me. And then I was in massive demand in that first year, which was good, but it was also bad because I wasn't charging anywhere near as much as what I could have been charging. And I charged that amount because I thought, well, I'm new, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I've got to charge this tiny amount so that I can kind of find my feet and prove myself. And that first year, there was a lot of time that I spent really feeling like a fraud, which I've later discovered is such a core part of the imposter complex,
Yeah.
which tells us that, you know, even if you're high functioning and high performing, you're most likely to be affected by the imposter complex. So if you feel like you might be a fraud and you're worried about it, the likelihood is that you're not, because real frauds don't worry about feeling like a fraud. That's something that my friend Tanya Geisler, who's an expert in the imposter complex, talks about. So about 6 months in, I had a conversation with somebody who said, hey, if you're booking out for 3 months at a time, you can double your rates, which felt
Yeah.
like a really scary thing to do. So I didn't completely take the leap. I did increase my rates on my website. And then I spoke to all my existing or past clients and said, hey, I'm going to be putting up my rates, but you can book in until the end of the year at the old rates. And so I kind of made it a little bit easier on myself that way.
Yeah.
So a couple of different lessons there, I think, you know, taking intentional steps forward rather than putting pressure on yourself to take a crazy leap. And then secondly, understanding that I was a beginner in the sense that I was a first-time business owner and I was only focusing on copywriting. But for the past 10 years, I had been writing and working on messaging and positioning and marketing. So I was completely diminishing what I already knew how to do. So I think really valuing everything that you bring to the table is a huge thing. And that came into play later on as well when I shifted my whole business and I began doing more strategic work, more consulting work, more high level work, highly paid work, was again when I realized I've been copywriting for, 5 years or however long, and I'm feeling a bit frustrated and I'm feeling a little bit underestimated. I would work with a client and they would say, can you just kind of go away and write this thing? And I'd be like, yeah, but, I really wanted to understand the decision that behind it. I wanted to see the fuller picture. And it was actually, I mentioned the Strengths Finder test. I mentioned the Strengths Finder test before. I worked with a
Yeah.
Strengths Finder friend of mine who said, well, your number one strength is strategy, and strategic thinking weaves through all 5 of your other top strengths. And it was kind of this aha moment for me because I realized, oh, like I'm feeling unfulfilled and I'm feeling underestimated because I'm really strategic and I'm not being given the opportunity to be as strategic as I want to be. So all of the new, I started just, cultivating relationships and community has been such a huge thing for me since day one. That's really how I've built my business, on social media, in real life, constantly reaching out to people and saying, hey, I'd love to connect and get to know each other better. I always go into these meetings. I talk about high intention, low attachment in the book. So it's not like I'm necessarily meeting with somebody to turn them into a client. I'm meeting with them because they look super interesting and I want to get to know them better. And at the end of those meetings, I would always say, please let me know, is there anything that I can do to support you? And oftentimes they would say the same thing. Sometimes they'd end up being clients. Sometimes they'd end up referring me to some of my biggest clients. Sometimes they would just be a great collaborative partner or somebody to share with if things got tough in my business. But that has been huge for me. And around that time that things began to shift, that's when, I went for a lunch meeting. And I was very real and very honest and very transparent about my experience thus far. And they had a project that they wanted me to help out with. I had no experience with it. But I think that they could see in me that I would be capable based on what I had done. So it was just a wonderful moment of leveraging that community building aspect to what I've always kind of done. And at the same time, being transparent, being real, being honest about what I had done and what I thought that I could do. I often talk about, there's an article that's been written, there's been studies that have been completed around women in particular. They don't tend to go for as many jobs as men, or they don't go for jobs where they feel like they're not fully qualified, whereas men will go for those jobs even if they don't check the boxes and all the qualifications. And so I think that something I actually would say I probably learned this from my dad is that I have never really been afraid to put myself forward for something if I think that I can do it, even if I haven't done it before. And I'm very transparent about that. You know, I haven't done this specific thing, but here's what I have done, and I think I can help you with this. So yeah, I've just given you a lot there, but feel free to pick it apart as you will.
No, I mean, I think that's super interesting, just in the fact that, um, well, first of all, I think just taking initiative is the hardest part. And the fact that you were able to spread it out over, manageable steps is really important. I think, people worry about, I mean, I'm the type of person who has a flip phone, right? So I'm the type of person who will just take a radical step and be like, all right, I'm gonna do this. But you know what? I realize that first of all, it might not be the smartest strategy, but at the same time, it's not a realistic strategy for most people. Most people want that security. Most people want to be able to say, okay, you know what? Let's just ease into it. And I think that's really powerful because, let's say you're 32 years old and you need income as well. So it's like, all right, you know what, if I'm able, and this is what you did, if you're able to get an income while working on the side and while easing into your entrepreneurship, then that is a very powerful method of really being able to transform your life in that way. Um, I do wonder, and I guess this is my next question. So what was it that allowed you to build a community around it? What was it that allowed you to get other people or what was it that allowed you to inspire other people to also be like, all right, you know what? I'm sort of struggling right now. Let's all build a community together and let's all come together and work on this, try to figure out how to grow our businesses together.
Yeah, there were definitely some communities that already existed. So, and there still are to this day, you know, Facebook groups with women who are all small business owners. Or, you know, I feel that there's a group for pretty much anybody, depending on what your particular focus is or area of interest is. And so early on, I was involved with a couple of these Facebook groups, and those women in those Facebook groups became my first clients. And then they
Mhm.
became the people to refer me, and then they became the people who became some of my best business buddies, who we'd get on a Zoom call even if they were in a completely different part of the country, and kind of share some of what we were going through. And I think that that was one of my earliest lessons. It doesn't matter what you're going through, you're never completely alone. There's always somebody else who can understand that, who maybe has been through some of the same things and can share some of their experiences. um, so that was definitely a big part. And then just being unafraid to reach out. As I said, I don't think that I could have built my business if it wasn't for social media. I mean, don't forget how old I am. And social media first became a thing in like the early 2000s. And I remember getting into it, yeah, I think like mid 2000s. And it was only then that the business that I wanted to create online became possible for me, because suddenly there was this whole network of people who I'd never connected to. And by the way, every single day I find somebody new on Instagram or a different platform where I'm like, hey, they're super
Yeah.
cool. Look at the business that they've created. I would love to connect with them. So I'm still always looking and connecting and enjoying learning from others. Sometimes I have mentors who don't even know that they're my mentors, because I kind of watch them from afar and I see what they're doing, and they kind of influence maybe how I want to show up. Um, but yeah, sometimes I will reach out and I'll have a Zoom call with somebody, or I'll obviously in better times have maybe an in-person coffee if they're local. And I've just learned so much through that. I think just being open to widening your network. You know, so many of my friendships have shifted over the past several years, and now some of my best friends are business owners, and I think there's
Mhm.
so much value in that because we just get each other in a different way. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but feel free to ask more if it didn't.
No, I mean, it definitely did. I do wonder. So two things. So one
Yeah.
thing I do worry about is when you have this sort of rebirth, when you have this sort of um, change. Um, what happened to your old life? Were you able to? You say you never took a leap of faith, but were you able in your life to really, especially with old friends, were you able to, hang on to those relationships, or did you sort of feel like you maybe outgrew them and had to sort of get rid of them? And then, of course, my second question is, how did you actually um, when you actually created this community, how'd you bring the people together? Like, what was your common purpose? What was your common drive to be able to tell people, oh yeah, you know what, we should create this community and it's going to really be beneficial for us?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to preface this by saying that I certainly have taken leaps of faith, but in practice, they probably looked a little bit more like
Mm,
intentional steps and kind of easing into something. I There have been many times when I've been thinking about doing something for a really long amount of time, whether it was starting my business or starting a podcast or writing a book, when there have been like years where I've been thinking about doing something and not doing the thing.
yeah.
So I think that sometimes it can almost go the other way, where you're trying to take the next intentional step, but you're really kind of scared. And one of the beliefs that I've had to kind of rewrite in my life has been, I'm not ready yet. I actually used to think that I wasn't ready, and then I realized you have to start sometimes before you're ready. So
Right.
that's a key piece as well. I mean, you don't necessarily have to burn all your bridges and take a leap of faith that's not calculated, that's not intentional, that you haven't really thought about. I mean, but yeah, just something that I wanted to throw in there. And then you had asked me, and I have my answer ready to go about the old friendships. Yeah, I
Yes.
would say that there. And let's not forget how, I mean, we've touched on religion a little bit, and another taboo, of course, is politics, although I actually don't
Of
think it should be
course.
taboo. I will say that politically, things have shifted that made me realize how much I believe in the things and the people that I do, and in the rights of certain people, of everybody, to exist in a certain way, shall we say?
That
So
was
I did,
so broad, but yes.
yeah, yeah, it really was. Um, but I guess, yeah, starting my business, just really learning who I was, what I believed in, what I feel is important, and then noticing how much or how little those aligned with other people, and also noticing what I needed from my friendships. And let's face it, as we get older, especially, I used to have so many friends, and then you realize, especially when you move country or you leave a company, sometimes when you change your life drastically, friends kind of fall away naturally. And
Yeah.
then you also notice that, maybe, I remember I had a friend who told me, I just don't think we have anything in common anymore. And I couldn't fault her on that, because we kind of didn't. So, some friendships I've kind of let go more gently. So yeah, I find that oftentimes friendships can fizzle out, and
Mhm.
it's just kind of, it's okay for that to happen. My grandmother used to always say, you're friends for a reason, friends for a season, and friends for life. I don't think she was the only one to say it,
Mhm.
but she said it a few times to me, so it's really stuck in my head. And I think I've just learned to be okay with that. I think that there have been some really close friendships that I've lost, and that maybe have been rekindled at some point later on, that really pained me. But it's just part and parcel of life, is uh, learning when to hold on and when to let go, and learning when maybe you're at fault, um, and maybe when the other person's at fault. I don't know. I think that a big part of my last several years has been really cultivating healthier boundaries. So noticing when somebody steps over those boundaries, and noticing if I need to say something, has
It's
been
also
huge.
becoming assertive, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think that's incredibly important. Like, stepping into your skin and really being able to say, like, okay, you know what? Like, I had a friend last year who, he's still my friend, but like, we had a dispute, and he he was just, sorting. I find that sometimes, like with friends, he was sort of playing like a dominance game. He was trying to like sort of like get on top of me, listings, and I'm not very interested in the dominance games. Like, like like if a friend, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but your friend will give you like a command. I forget what he told me, but he just sort of wanted me to like submit, and I was like, okay, what are we doing right here? And yeah, I just like, all I did was I just like stood up, and I was like, come on, dude, like, what are we doing here? And just like, most people would kind of like shy away, and it's sort of playing into it. But I think, just having that positive intention and really being assertive. I think it really goes into the virtue of being able to take control of your life. I think it's a really powerful thing to just be able to say what you feel.
Definitely, definitely. And that, you know, if you can resolve a situation from that, that's great. Sometimes, unfortunately, you have to take a step back, and that can be hard to do. But I think you have to, again, going back to that self-awareness, like, what do you need to do for you to take care of you? Because that's the most important thing. I definitely, especially in recent years, I've had a couple of friendships that have felt competitive. And I remember for the longest time sort of thinking, like, what is wrong here? Like,
Yeah.
why don't I feel supported by this person? Why is this person not showing up for me? And why do I feel like they're just taking from me all the time? And I don't get it. And I remember like agonizing over this endlessly. And my partner saying to me, you know, I think, Nikki, it might just be time to take a step back. And I've taken that step back, and it has maybe been a little bit awkward and a little bit strange, but and maybe I could have been more assertive and said, there definitely was an opportunity for me to say, hey, you didn't do this, and this really hurt my feelings. But I think what I've realized is that there, some people think that we're in competition, and I don't have any time or energy for that, because I really believe it's more focus for all of us. And I don't want you to be sort of pretending to be my friend and then like kind of undermining me in little subtle ways. So that's been a funny one. I mean, we're all human beings. None of us are perfect, but I think that is one of the great lessons of life is, like I said, learning when to hold on and when to let go. And sometimes you can let things fizzle out, and sometimes you just need to have a heart-to-heart conversation. And sometimes you let relationships go for a period of time, and then they come back around again. You know, I have a great friendship with somebody who I was friends with when I first came to the UK, and our relationship, it kind of fizzled, and now we're spending a lot more time together. So that's been really nice.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's really powerful. I wonder if friendship, you know, I think everything that we do has some sort of self-interest in that. I truly believe that, you know, like
Yeah.
whenever we're in a friendship, it's like, you know, we're not doing it because we're doing it for the other person. We're doing it because we have a self-interest in going over our friend's house. We have a self-interest in having a conversation, you know, whether it be I want to get money from them, which isn't really a friendship, or just like I want to be in their presence, right? I want to have a good time. I want to develop this meaningful relationship. And that's a self-interest in itself. And I find that um it's weird trying to balance, like, friendship is not, it doesn't feel self-interested, but at the same time it's hard balancing that with, okay, how am I going to cultivate some sort of self-interest from this relationship? And I find that especially for entrepreneurs, we're always finding, okay, you know what, I'm going to spend 3 hours of my time with this person. How am I going to make it as beneficial as possible, when, you know what, the whole purpose is to just let go and spend good time with your friends. You know, I find that there's such a hard balance between the two.
Yeah. And I would say that um, the friendships for me that have stood the test of time are, their foundation is love and self-love, right? So these are friends who respect my boundaries
Mhm.
and who never make me, or very rarely make me feel any kind of way that makes me feel like I'm not safe or supported. And on the flip side, these are friends who I adore. um, you know, I deeply love them. I love who they are, what they're doing in the world, how we connect, how we laugh. So that's really how I look at my friendships these days, particularly my closest friendships. And again, as I've got older, those close friendships have become smaller and smaller, but they've become so precious to me. And so I do agree with you that there is a degree of self-interest. And I think that kind of goes back to the high intention, low attachment thing. When you're first cultivating
Mhm.
new friendships and relationships and broadening your network, there's kind of this, you kind of go into it with the highest of intentions, like, it would be really cool if this person and I found a way to help each other, right? That's the self-interest part. And the low attachment is, but if that doesn't end up happening, then I'm just okay to be present with it, and just kind of go with the flow. And then I think as relationships deepen, as friendships deepen, and oftentimes it's because you kind of believe the same things, value the same things, enjoy the same things, then that's when that love really starts to grow. And I'm an incredibly loyal friend. So it's funny, I read something once. I think sometimes I forget how different the culture is maybe in the UK to the United States. I read something once that said, I got to try and get this right now. It was comparing us to fruits. I think it said that people from the UK, I know I'm going to screw it up, but essentially, people from the UK, we're hard to get to know. So we have kind of this hard outer core, but once you're inside, so maybe it was like a coconut or a pineapple or something like that. But once you're inside, we're soft, and we're so grateful for your friendship, and we're so loyal, and we're do or die kind of thing. Whereas in the States, I find that everybody can be really friendly and lovely, and then a part of me sometimes thinks, like, is this person for real? Like, is this just like
Yeah.
a superficial thing? It's really interesting. And it's been hard sometimes noticing when people are just like super nice and they're just really nice to everybody, or when they're like really truly my ride or die. So I find that there's sort of like a weird cultural thing happening there that does
Yeah.
make things a little bit grayer over here sometimes.
I do appreciate how the people in Europe are so much more upfront. Like it's
Yes.
like they actually did studies like in business, the people in America, let's say you give a presentation. It wasn't that great of a presentation. If I were an American, which, I often reject this value, but I would say that was wonderful. That was incredible. And that was great, but you had this little problem, but I thought it was great. And here are the five things that I love, but there's the one thing that I hated. And it's sort of, then you're sending them mixed messages at the same time. You're telling them, here were five things that I loved and one thing that I hated. I'm thinking, okay, that was an incredible presentation. Good job, Nick, right? But then at the same time, if you're European, then most likely you're going to say, okay, here's the thing that I didn't like to start off the feedback. And I think that's really powerful. Like I love that because it's upfront, it's to the point, and it doesn't send any mixed messages. But at the same time, I find in America we have this problem with, I guess, flattery, right? Trying to soften up one's ego before you get in there and give them your feedback. And I'm like, I'm not very interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, I learned all about the positivity sandwich from Americans. So
Really.
yeah, I kind of like that though, maybe because I'm a bit of a sensitive soul. So if somebody kind of eases me into negative feedback, then it kind of feels a little bit better sometimes.
Mm.
But I can take all kinds of feedback, which maybe is my English tougher skin. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways, honestly. It really does. I'm truly a
Yeah.
believer of people must it's a brutal thing, but like I'm truly a believer of people must hit the bottom before they rise out. If people are, let's say you're struggling with some sort of addiction, right? Because my book that I read about is called Breaking Bad Habits, and most people struggle with, smoking, overeating, like all these things. And I find that people are comfortable if their lives aren't that bad and they can just
Mm.
ride it out, right? But once somebody hits that bottom point, once somebody hits that low point, then that's the time where they're like, all right, I need to make a change, right? Because that discomfort, that I'm gonna call it suffering, but that's a little extreme. That suffering is what helps somebody realize, okay, I need to shake myself out of apathy. And I think the positivity sandwich, getting back to that, right? The positivity sandwich, it's great. Like it does help for somebody to be like, all right, I that actually wasn't a bad presentation, because often we could go up to people and say, you know what, your presentation was terrible when it really wasn't that bad. But I find that, yeah, I just like being upfront with people because I want them to like hit that rock bottom sort of and be like, all right, you know what, that answer really made me uncomfortable. Like him giving me that direct feedback. So hopefully hopefully that person will make a change.
So you're blunt and honest, and then you kind of pick them up from
Then I kind of
there.
picked them up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes all ways. There's actually Michael Jordan. His parents always told him after a game, they told him one good thing that he did, and then ripped it to him.
Really?
Yeah, that was always how
It's
it
so
is.
interesting. One thing that I actually share this story in the book as well is that, and people don't often expect this of me, but I used to be a Muay Thai kickboxer, and
Whoa.
I did my first and only full. I mean, I used to spar with guys twice my size all the time, but
Wow.
I finally did a full contact. We had an audience in the ring, and
Wow.
I remember training for that, and my trainer never ever encouraged me. He never ever said, like, you got this in the bag, or like, you're doing really great, keep it going. Never said a single word like that. I remember working my butt off to get in shape for this fight, and I ended up against my expectations, winning the fight. And I
Really?
remember he said to me afterwards, I knew that you were going to win it. He said, but I didn't want to tell you. He said, because I didn't want you to get complacent. So I
Wow.
don't share that story in the book. I share a more inspirational story. But I often think about that. I'm like, gosh, that was kind of mean of him. But maybe he was right, and I would have got complacent. So I do think you're right. Sometimes we need to be a little bit realer with the feedback that we give people, so that
Yeah,
they can leverage that. Yeah.
the person that really changed my life, I could say, was my high school accounting teacher. I was 14 years old, freshman, and just, didn't really care about school, didn't really care about anything, honestly, just was sort of coasting through life, you could say. And then I had my accounting teacher who, sophomore year of high school, who just like, he was the tough guy. Like most high school teachers are going to be like, all right, you know what? I don't really care, like whatever. He was like, the average class in all my classes were B's and A's, and for his class it was a C, and didn't give me one ounce of joy the entire time. Didn't give me 1 ounce of good job, Nick. This was great. Every time he looked at me, he's like, you could do better. You could do better. And I guess, for those sort of people, I could call it sort of like a father complex, like I looked at him and I was like, sort of like children with their dads, like they really say, all right, I want him to feel my approval. I want him to be proud of me, things like that. And I wanted my teacher to be proud of me. I wanted him to literally go up to me and say, great job. Like you actually did a good job on that. And I got to say, that was what pushed me to go further, right? Like striving for that feedback, striving for that approval from some random teacher was actually what was able to make me work harder.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's so interesting how we find motivation, and sometimes it can be like, sometimes like if somebody that I really deeply admire says, you're doing so great, it makes me want to do more. But at the same
Yeah.
time, sometimes I think we almost do need the opposite to kind of light a fire under our butt. And yeah, like you say, it's very easy for us human beings to get complacent. We like things to be easy and comfortable. So
Have
yeah,
you ever
that's
seen the
cool that
movie
you
Fight
had that.
Club?
Yes.
Fight Club. I was watching that the other day, and it was so funny because I was thinking about like leadership strategies and motivation strategies. And Brad Pitt in the movie, his motivation strategy was, "You guys are nothing. You guys." He's like, "You." What did he call them? He called them dirt. He's like, you guys are
Wow.
dirt amongst other dirt, and and you guys are meaningless. And for whatever
Wow.
reason, that made them work. But then at the same time, I also watched the movie Dead Poet Society, and
Yes.
Dead Poet, right? Like incredible movie, right? Robin
Mm.
Williams, highly
Yes.
suggest. And everybody, his thing is motivating people, finding their meaning, finding their
Yes.
why. And it's true. It's like we could be motivated by literally any sort of strategy, whatever works. It's just some work for some people and some don't.
Yeah. And I definitely am more of the Robin Williams school of thought than Brad Pitt and Fight Club. But I was just thinking of, when you're talking about that, about a time recently when, um, you know, I don't necessarily kick people's butts. When I in my mastermind group, I love just reflecting back to people the possibilities, reminding them of what they're capable of, and that kind of thing.
Mm.
But I think sometimes we're really motivated by being in a position of pain or discomfort, like we were talking about. And I had one of my masterminders recently saying, I feel like I'm not getting anything done, da, 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 da. And it wasn't the first time I'd heard her say something like that. And I said, nothing is going to change for you until you bring other people onto your team. And
Mm.
it just came time for me to just kind of lay it out on the table. Like, you're going to continue to feel like this, you're going to continue to feel stuck, you're going to continue not to move forward unless you take this action. And so, yeah, I think we owe so much to those mentors in our life who know when to encourage us and know when to gently kick our butts.
Gently, yeah. I mean, I think it's true. It's a good balancing act, especially in the you know, we have a we have a big focus today on mental health, and I think it's really it's so weird because there are some times where like objectively you could say my mental health is not good, just because not in a concerning way, but it's like, people say we should live to be happy, and it's like my mom, whenever I talk to her, she's like, "Are you happy? Are you happy?" And I'm like, "I'm not very interested in being happy because to achieve success requires some sort of struggle,
Mm.
Like sometimes I want to be happy, but at other times I want to struggle through this. I want to work hard and I want to succeed and all these things, and they don't require happiness, And it's so hard being able to balance that, trying to feel struggle, but at the same time, like enjoying it and making sure that, you're not miserable while doing your work.
Yeah, it is. It is so important. That's for sure. Yes. And, I remember talking to a peer of mine. Actually, she was leading like a Q&A, and she said something like, I have very well managed anxiety and depression. And my respect for her absolutely soared because, I definitely have experienced depression. I definitely,
Yep.
have experienced anxiety, and that's also why I have the approach to being in business that I do, because I'm mindful of wanting to take care of myself. um, when she said that, I just thought, oh yes, we need more people saying that and owning that and being like, hey, I have this thing and I'm dealing with it, and it doesn't make me any less powerful or capable or able to do what I do. So yeah.
Yeah, wow. All right. One final question then. I
Okay.
think I think you know, you are full of wisdom, so I want to ask you one final question.
Thanks.
Throughout your life, what is the number one thing, and obviously it could be related to, you shared a lot of wisdom here. What is the greatest thing that you've learned? What is your advice for anyone
Hmm.
listening to this podcast? Hopefully somebody, in college, trying to really figure out who they are. What do you think you would share to them?
I think just learning to love myself, which sounds so simplistic, but
Yeah.
even thinking about times years ago in my life when maybe I experienced a lot of shame or a lot of hurt or a lot of pain, and uh, kind of almost seeing that younger version of myself as kind of like a little sister, or someone who I can just send love to. And yeah, it's been a game changer. And I'm not saying that every minute of every day I remember to love myself.
Yeah.
It definitely is an ongoing practice, but if you can do that, your whole world will change for the better.
And what I believe is you need to learn to love yourself first, right? Like
Yes.
that should be your number one priority.
Yes.
I find
Yes.
that people are like, you know what? I'm going to struggle. I'm going to work on money for my first 30 years of my life, and then I'll focus on loving myself. It's like, no, no,
Right.
no, no. Like
And this
either do
isn't
it at
in
the
an
same time.
Right. And this isn't in an ego sense of like, because I definitely went through that phase of being like thinking, if I pretend to be this person, then that will make me this person. And it was very much rooted in ego.
Mhm.
But underneath, I was deeply insecure. And so when we're talking about loving yourself, it really does mean from the bottom of your heart, loving exactly who you are with all of your imperfections and flaws, and just knowing that you are still worthy. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Nikki Groom, where can everybody find you on social media? How can they join if there's open attendance? Can people join this mastermind group? How could they find your book? Tell me
Yes.
everything.
Yes, so nikkigroom.com is my website. I keep it super simple. So Nikki Groom everywhere on social media. I love connecting with new people on social media. As I had mentioned, my book is called A Power of Your Own. I don't know if that's going to be backwards for you. And
No,
that's
it's good.
available on Amazon and everywhere that you buy books. But yeah, come and check out what I have going on. I do have more information about the mastermind on my website. I also have a community that you can join. And yeah, just shoot me a note, shoot me a message, get involved. And I actually have a few free resources on my website as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'd love to connect with anyone who watched or listened to this and enjoyed what we had to say.
All right, awesome. All of that will definitely be linked below. All right. Nikki Groom, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nick. I appreciated this conversation.